Good morning. It's 2:49 a.m. I am on my way to the gym right now. I don't know if I had did a video about this, but Friday we go down to the Maricopa jail. We go to a medium security facility, and right now we speak to men. Last Friday, me and another minister had went down to Maricopa County like we normally do, right off of 35th Avenue in Lower Buckeye. We get in there, or 35th and Buckeye. We get in there, and when we walk in, it was different. Because instead of looking at the men, I was looking at a bunch of boys with facial hair and smiles on their face. The reason I say facial hair with smiles, because most of the time when you get around men, they don't smile a whole lot because life has kind of kicked them a little bit more, and the burden of what's involved with being a man is a little bit too much sometimes to smile through. So I knew I was in the presence of children. So when we get in there, the minister gets to talking, and he's engaging with them, and then he calls me up and says, "Now I'd like for you to say some words to them." And something very surreal happened at the moment. I went around the room and I started asking them how long they had been there. And one had been there almost a year. I could relate. Then I asked them, what was their ages? The majority were 16. One was turning 18. And as I got to telling them my story and how I had been in prison for over 10 years, they couldn't believe it. As soon as I said it, their mouths dropped open and they looked around and they were like, "Did he say what I thought he said?" And as I get into my story about my life, I started talking to him about my kids and how I understand that, God has brought us to this point where now I have children. But I thought the most surreal thing that I spoke about was the fact that the age of my children reflected different points in my life. Different points in my life where I had went through something. So I was talking to him about my oldest son, who was 18. And is smart, is on top of it. Then I talked to him about my 7-year-old son, who's smart, who's learning himself. And I talked to him about my 2-year-old. How all she wants to do is play and smile. Then I told him about how good God was. And I said, God will give you double for your trouble. God will pay you back double for anything that you have lost, whether it been time, whether it had been money, rest, sleep. God will give you back double for your trouble. I know that to be a fact. Because when I was 18, I was being transferred to an adult prison facility, a maximum prison facility in Florence, Arizona. My 18-year-old isn't doing that. When I had turned 7, I had came home from a weekend at my grandmother's house. My dad picked me up to bring me home. And when we walked in the house, we had seen that everything had been taken. Everything. I had just had a birthday. Even my toys were gone. It was the first time I had ever seen my father cry. The woman that he was with had left. But she didn't leave empty-handed. She took me over to my grandmother's, left me there, waited till he went to work, and took everything out the house. Everything. There was nothing left. Not even anything in my room. And when I look at my 7-year-old, he has his mother and his father were involved with their school, outside playing basketball with him, loving him. Then my daughters too. At 2 is when my mother left and my father and them separated. And even though I seen her periodically, I didn't know much about her. At the time, you're not intended to know what the future is supposed to look like. You're not intended to know how it's going to play out. Malachi is not my biological child, but yet he's without a father. I was not in a place for me to be his biological father. But yet I came into a time in his life when he needed a father. And he came into my life at a time when I needed a son, and to see a part of me that I didn't get to see at his age. That's God's intervention. He took me into a jail to talk to kids who I could relate to, who were 16 going on 18 when I was going through jail, 16 turning 18, going into a correctional facility. He allowed me to portray my life as a 2-year-old, and then a 7-year-old, and then an 18-year-old, but now I get to see it through the eyes of corrected lenses. It's only with a real spiritual heart that you get to see some of the hidden undertones of what God is really doing. And that ends up being the backbone of my strength. That ends up being the one thing that I set my hopes and expectations on when life starts to get rough. Because my kids, 2, 7, 18, are nowhere in the same position that I was in at their age. So what I tried to convey to these kids was, it may be rough. This may be a part of your process. This may be something you have to go through. But understand me, that God will give you double for your trouble. He will replace anything that you have lost. Your position of faith has to be restored, and it has to be in full force to see it.